Lesson is called Pangea, and it's going to focus on the standard 844, which says that students will describe environments based on fossil evidence. And so what we're going to be looking at is the idea, the theory, that at one point all of the continents in the world formed one supercontinent called Pangea. And this continent was formed somewhere around 300 million years ago and started to break up somewhere around 200 million years ago. And there's a lot of evidence for this, and we're going to look at a couple of the different types of evidence there are for it. And eventually we're going to have students digging around in the sand looking for fossils and trying to identify what those fossils are, because that's a really important part of understanding the past of the Earth, is finding fossils and trying to interpret what you're looking at. So the first idea, the first bit of evidence that we have for Pangea can be found in the way that the continents, honestly, are almost shaped like puzzles to fit into one another. And especially if you look at South America and the east coast of South America and compare that to the west coast of Africa, you see that the shapes are very similar, they fit into each other very well, and actually the geology is very similar. It's almost just like a continuation of certain geological aspects from the west coast of Africa to the east coast of South America. So the first thing we'll have students do is attempt to use these Pangea puzzle pieces to put together these continents in a way that they think makes sense, the way they fit together based on the shapes. And so I'll kind of show you sort of how they actually go together, but we'll let students puzzle through this for a few minutes, kind of looking at the commonalities between different coastlines and seeing if they can get things to go together. Alright, so really roughly this is basically the theory of how the continents were at one point all together. You've got North America, South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, Australia, and then here is Europe up here. And you can imagine that as these moved apart, okay, they sort of formed our modern day continents. And you can find a claymation video below this video. It's on a separate page, but if you click on the link it'll take you there, that shows how these continents moved apart, starting with Pangea and moving towards modern day continents. So after we've looked at the geological evidence for Pangea, the next thing we're going to do is talk about the fossil evidence that there is. And there's several really good examples of fossil evidence that support Pangea, and mainly, all of the fossils that support Pangea. Basically what happens is you find identical species in bands that cut across modern day continents. So you find the same identical species in South America and Africa. So if those continents have always been separated by an ocean, it's really hard to explain how you would have the exact same species living at the exact same time on both continents. And so there's several different examples of species that were alive at the same time on multiple continents, and the only real way to explain it is by understanding that at one point all the continents were together as one large landmass. So, what we'll have students do after we've discussed a few of the fossil examples, and there's a map that I've created that has 4 of the really predominant species, the predominant fossils that have been found that really do a good job of explaining Pangea and how fossils have helped explain that theory. Once we get done with that, we'll actually have students look for their own fossils. And what you'll need to do as the teacher is get some sort of fossils. If you're working with me, I've sent out teeth, carnivore, omnivore, and herbivore teeth. And I'll just have you simply take this tub of sand, and I'm just going to have you draw, turn it into quadrants. So make 4 quadrants, and bury 1 tooth in each quadrant. And then what we'll have students do is work in groups of 4, each working in one of the 4 quadrants to find their tooth. And some of the teeth are much, much bigger than others, some are much smaller than others. But what I like to have the students do is use their fossil digging tool, a popsicle stick, and just slowly and carefully work their way through their quadrant until they find their tooth. Now, once they find it, they're going to be working as a group to try to identify it. And we're looking at a carnivore tooth, a herbivore tooth, or an omnivore tooth. And this handout can also be found right below this video. This gives students a good example of what it's like to look for fossils and then try to figure out what you're looking at based on a small fragment of a whole animal. And so we'll finish with a discussion about how paleontologists have found these different fossils and how these different fossils have led to theories about the Earth's past. Pangea is one of those theories, and of course there's lots of fossil evidence that let us know maybe what the climate was like in the past. And so it's just an interesting lesson to get kids engaged and thinking about finding fossils and using those fossils to try to unearth the past. Extensions of this would be go to Morrill Hall. You know, that's a great place. They have great educational programs at Morrill Hall, and really lots of interesting things going on there all the time, where students could easily learn a lot more about the past, especially here in Nebraska. And if a field trip's not possible, there's lots of extensions you can do. You could take students out rock hunting, or take them out to find fossils, or even go out and make plaster casts of different animal footprints or leaves and make your own fossils. You know, a fossil is simply just evidence of life, and so you could create your own also. So that's the Pangea lesson, just starting to think about fossils in the Earth's past. And so I think students will have a good time with this one, and hopefully you will too. So we'll see you next time.